blackout began without warning. Screens dimmed, instruments faltered, voices froze mid-sentence. For 3.6 seconds the world lost contact, and in that silence something vast stirred beyond the edge of the solar system. A comet, catalogued as 3I Atlas, had turned from object into presence. Its tail flared with light not of reflection but of intention. In control rooms, men and women stared into nothing, convinced for the first time that the void had noticed them. When the systems revived, the investigation began. Scientists combed through data, chasing anomalies that refused to stay within the lines of physics, plasma that bent like circuits, resonance that pulsed like thought, signals that seemed to echo voices never spoken. Reports multiplied, theories diverged, and still the question deepened. Was this merely a comet, or had humanity touched something far older, far stranger, perhaps even alive? The philosophers saw beyond equations. They spoke of memory that never dies, of light as scripture, of a universe where nothing is forgotten. Some warned of assimilation, others dreamed of communion. All agreed that 3I Atlas was no longer just a body of ice and dust. It was a mirror, a question, a prophecy written in motion. Tonight we will walk through 30 theories about this comet, ranked from the most ordinary to the most impossible, from the boring to the wild. What begins as science will end as speculation. What begins as certainty will end as doubt. And perhaps, somewhere along that climb, the comet will stop being object and reveal itself as truth. The first and most ordinary explanation begins with the solar wind. For centuries humanity has watched comets trail across the night, their long, bright tails stretching away from the sun. It was learned long ago that these tails are not intrinsic to the comet itself, but the result of particles streaming outward from the sun. The solar wind, a continuous river of charged ions, strikes the comet's surface, vaporizing dust and ice, pushing it outward into a glowing plume. To describe 3I Atlas as nothing more than this process is the safest beginning. In this theory, the blackout was coincidence, a fragile moment of technology faltering under cosmic weather. Radiation storms are common, solar activity can disrupt satellites, cut through signals, burn delicate circuits. The comet itself would be innocent, only drifting as a lump of rock and volatile ice. Its long luminous tail would be no more mysterious than the flame of a candle flickering in wind. The physics here is well established. As the comet approaches the sun, heat strips volatile gases from its surface, releasing jets that scatter dust into surrounding space. The solar wind carries these fragments, shaping them into streams that bend away from the star. The interaction is complex, but not mystical. A careful model of magnetohydrodynamics, equations long taught in textbooks, can describe how dust aligns with fields, how light reflects from particles, how the glowing veil emerges. For many scientists, this is the proper explanation. To imagine more is to leap beyond evidence. The blackout can be filed as error, the resonance as statistical artifact, the whispers as psychological projection. What matters is the solar wind, relentless and impartial, sculpting comets just as it has for billions of years. Yet even within this ordinary explanation, unease remains. The blackout lasted exactly 3.6 seconds. Not a random span, but precise to the decimal. The solar wind may scatter signals, but seldom with such surgical brevity. The comet's tail may glow, but rarely does it pulse. Still, the first theory stands. If one were to rank possibilities from boring to wild, this is the anchor at the base. 3I Atlas is nothing but comet, dust pushed by wind, light reflected from ice. It is spectacle, not intelligence. The mysteries that surround it are illusions born of distance, errors of interpretation, coincidences of timing. The narrator sets this as the foundation. Before we climb into the strange and before we entertain archives and assimilation, we must begin at the bottom rung, the explanation that soothes by denying wonder. The comet is tail in the wind, nothing more. Or so the first theory insists. The second theory reaches for an equally grounded explanation. It claims that 3I Atlas is not strange at all, that its behaviour is the inevitable outcome of gravity's pull. Every object in space is locked in endless negotiation with forces around it. Though the comet, in this view, is no more than a traveller passing through shifting fields, its anomalies explained by the subtleties of celestial mechanics. Supporters of this theory begin with orbit. 3i Atlas has followed a trajectory that is long, eccentric, and complex, carrying it from the cold between stars into the burning reach of the sun. Along this path it has passed near giant planets, grazing their invisible fields. Jupiter in particular, with its vast weight, bends comets like reeds in wind. A small variation in velocity, a minor tug at the wrong moment, can send trajectories spiralling. To an observer on Earth, the result looks like deviation, unpredictability, even violation of physics, but within the system of equations it is all predictable. If signals broke or data bent, gravity could be culprit. A gravitational wave, however faint, could have disrupted instruments tuned to measure delicacy. Even small oscillations can scatter timing, causing blackouts measured in seconds. The numbers may appear too neat, too sharp, but neatness is often projection. The human eye searches for pattern where none exists. In this view, the comet's tail is equally obedient to forces. Dust streams curve not because they are alive, but because they are bound in the invisible architecture of orbits. Particles fall along arcs drawn by the sun and planets, bending in ways that mimic intention but are nothing more than gravity at work. This explanation reassures. It draws no need for consciousness or archive. It sees the blackout as a blip caused by orbital geometry, instruments misaligned during a gravitational shift. It sees the rhythm as an artifact of resonance, a byproduct of matter caught in competing pulls. To cling to gravity is to cling to order, to insist the cosmos remains impartial, a machine of laws without desire. Yet as with the first theory, doubt seeps through. Gravity may bend light and alter orbits, but can it write words? Can it explain the sudden symmetry of eyes in a blurred frame, the cadence of voices inside helmets? To say yes is to stretch the comfort of physics until it thins to denial. Still, the ranking demands progression. From solar wind to gravitational pull, we remain within the boring zone, anchored to explanations that refuse imagination. In this light, the comet is not archive or message. It is a stone drifting through the weight of planets, a body bent by forces larger than itself. No mystery, no intelligence, only mass in motion. Or so the second theory insists. The third theory refuses mystery by returning to turbulence, the most common companion of plasma in space. The comet's tail, in this account, is nothing but the chaos of charged particles scattered by solar wind, colliding, twisting, and collapsing into endless variation. To those who believe this theory, the anomalies are illusions born of human pattern-seeking. The comet is plasma storm, nothing more. Plasma is unruly. It bends to magnetism, surges with instabilities, flows in ways that even supercomputers struggle to predict. In laboratories on Earth, plasma experiments collapse into noise within seconds, spirals unraveling, arcs snapping, filaments tearing themselves apart. The same, they argue, must be true of the comet. What seems to resemble circuits or synapses is nothing but coincidence. Temporary structures doomed to dissolve. The blackout fits this narrative. Spacecraft passing through turbulent plasma fields have long reported disruptions. Static hisses across channels, signals scatter, power grids fail. The 3.6-second silence may have felt surgical, but it was no more than a burst of interference, the kind satellites endure whenever the solar wind grows restless. Instruments, too, betray their keepers. Sensors designed to capture delicacy can misinterpret chaos as rhythm. A string of random bursts may appear as cadence. A cluster of noise may resemble signal. The word listen, recorded once in blurred transmission, could be statistical accident, a mirage of coincidence carved from turbulence. The virtue of this theory lies in its simplicity. Plasma is abundant, chaos inevitable, and human minds are eager to weave meaning into noise. To attribute thought to storm is to indulge superstition. Better to accept the comet as a vast weather system, dazzling in scale, yet mindless. And yet the theory falters under scrutiny. Plasma is chaotic, yes, but chaos does not sustain rhythm. Randomness rarely repeats with precision. The 12-second pulses were too regular, too patient, too persistent to be dismissed so easily. Nor does turbulence write names of the dead into data logs, nor echo voices that have not yet been spoken. Still, the ranking holds us within the boring zone. If one insists on denying intention, turbulence is a ready shield. The comet becomes a storm of particles, a natural display without memory, without design. No voice, no archive, only the endless roar of plasma against solar wind. Or so the third theory insists. The fourth theory stays within the cage of physics, but moves the explanation from turbulence to magnetism. In this view, the comet is nothing more than a conductor drifting through invisible fields. Its dust and plasma interact with solar magnetism, bending into patterns that appear deliberate but are no more than fluctuations of force. The argument begins with the sun. The star breathes magnetism in endless waves, its fields curling outward in spirals, breaking, reconnecting, flaring. These magnetic storms spread across the solar system and tugging at every charged particle they encounter. Comet tails are especially sensitive, their filaments made of ions eager to align with field lines. When the sun shifts, so do the tails. 3i Atlas, they argue, is caught in this restless sea. Its glowing arcs and sudden rhythms are no mystery. They are simply echoes of magnetic oscillations sweeping across its body. The blackout that startled controllers on Earth can be read the same way. Magnetic reconnection events are violent and swift, able to cut signals, distort electronics, silence channels. A 3.6-second interruption would be unusual, but not impossible. The neatness of the pulse, the rhythm of 12 seconds, could also be explained by resonance within the solar field. Magneto-hydrodynamic waves often fall into repeating cycles, driving charged matter into oscillations that look eerily alive. To a human ear, they resemble breath. To a human mind, they resemble intent. But to physics, they are nothing more than resonance, field interacting with field. This theory provides comfort. It wraps the comet in the laws of electromagnetism, dismissing voices and whispers as illusions born of expectation. The instruments recorded signals, yes, but signals shaped by the sun, not by the comet itself. 3i Atlas, in this account, is no actor, no archive, no mind. It is a mirror reflecting the invisible weather of space. And yet, doubt creeps in again. Magnetic oscillations may repeat, but rarely with such patience. The signals recorded were not messy curves, but sharp, intentional beats. The blackout was too precise, or the appearance of symmetry in data. The echo of words in static sits uneasily within the frame of simple fluctuation. Still, for those unwilling to step into the strange magnetism is the safest shield. The comet becomes nothing but charged dust tugged by the sun's field. It does not remember. It does not listen. It does not answer. Only magnetic lines weaving through plasma. Or so the fourth theory insists. The fifth and final theory of the boring zone strips the mystery down to human failure. In this account, 3i Atlas is ordinary, and all strangeness comes from our tools, the blackout, the rhythms, even the word listen. None of it belongs to the comet, it belongs to error. Satellites are fragile. They drift through radiation, endure micrometeoroid strikes, suffer thermal stress across extremes of cold and heat. Instruments degrade, sensors falter, circuits accumulate noise. A blackout of 3.6 seconds could be nothing more than power fluctuation, a capacitor tripping into reset, a timer locking in a loop. To call it a message is to mistake malfunction for intent. Signals too can betray their interpreters. Random bursts of static, once processed through filters and algorithms, may align into shapes and patterns never truly present. A cluster of noise can resemble heartbeat. A spurious echo can form into words. Human minds, trained to find meaning, will seize on coincidence and call it revelation. Even the vanished satellite might find mundane explanation. A catastrophic systems failure, unreported debris strike, or collision with untracked fragments could erase it without trace. The last blurred image of twin lights may be compression error, pixels stretched and doubled until eyes appear where none exist. This theory offers the cruelest comfort. It denies the comet entirely, placing the blame on human fallibility. The cosmos is tenant, it says. Only our machines speak nonsense. The comet does not answer. It does not observe. It does not remember. We have misheard our own static, mistaking it for the voice of the void. And yet, in this theory lies unease. Instruments fail, but seldom with such precision. Noise produces many illusions, but rarely ones repeated across independent systems. For error to explain all anomalies, every machine would need to stumble in perfect rhythm. Every glitch would need to compose itself into cadence. Coincidence stretched too far becomes its own impossibility. Still, the fifth theory insists on denial. 3i Atlas is comet, ordinary and mute. The anomalies are not cosmic but human, shadows of our own frailty projected into the stars. The comet is silent, only our machines whisper. Or so the fifth theory insists. We began at the bottom of the scale, where explanations kept the comet ordinary, a body sculpted by solar winds, bent by gravity, shaken by turbulence, brushed by magnetic storms, and betrayed by failing machines. Each theory carried weight, each offered comfort, each insisted the mystery was no more than error or weather. Yet comfort cracked, the blackout lasted with precision, the pulses repeated with patience, the images lingered with symmetry. To call them illusions was possible, but to believe it demanded silence in the face of unease. We have reached the end of the boring. From here the climb begins, into the strange, where science still speaks but speaks in tones it no longer fully understands. The blackout was the first true fracture in the ordinary. Systems across the globe faltered in unison. Satellites blinked out. Consoles froze. Every circuit lost coherence for 3.6 seconds. When power returned, the logs revealed something unsettling. The silence had not been empty. It had been filled. Engineers replayed the recordings frame by frame. The usual static was absent. Instead there was inversion, a waveform that did not drift outward but folded inward, as though the instruments were being played in reverse. The comet had not received signal, it had sent one, and that signal had moved against expectation. Thriller narratives begin with unease, and here unease was all that remained. Operators described the sensation of pressure in their chests, as if air itself had thickened. Clocks across control rooms flickered, second hands jumping backward before snapping forward again. The blackout was not loss, it was insertion. The idea spread quickly, a reverse signal, transmitted not to be heard but to be imposed. Unlike radio, which carries meaning in amplitude or frequency, this was structure, coded in absence. When systems collapsed, they were not failing, they were overwriting. Some dismissed it as cascade failure, a domino of electronics under stress, but cascade does not produce symmetry. The blackout struck every station with identical length, identical interval, identical recovery. Coincidence stretched into pattern, and pattern demanded cause. The comet tail became suspect. Charged dust and plasma can act as antennae, scattering and bending radiation. If the structure aligned, it could become transmitter on scale unimaginable. What appeared as luminous veil might be dish array, focusing energy inward before releasing it in a pulse. If so, then the blackout was not accident, it was test. Broadcast launch not to communicate but to erase, to clear, to impose. For 3.6 seconds, humanity was silent not by error but by design. The thriller edge sharpened. If a signal can erase, what else can it do? What might follow blackout is not slenderness but command. To lose control of machines is one step, to lose control of thought is the next. The reverse signal remained inscrutable. A fragment of silence replayed until it burned into memory. To some it was technical glitch, to others it was message. To this fearful it was invasion. Theories are ranked from boring to wild, and this is the first step upward, out of safety, for here the comet is no longer stone or dust, it is transmitter. And humanity has already heard its first command. Or so the sixth theory insists. The seventh theory begins not with silence but with light. Telescopes aimed at the halo of 3I Atlas captured streams of plasma bending into patterns that seemed impossible. They did not scatter in chaos, as turbulence predicts. They aligned, branched, rejoined, forming shapes that uncannily resembled synapses in a neural map. Plasma is not stranger to structure. Under magnetic fields, it can twist into ropes, curl into filaments, weave into braids, but in this case the filaments did more. They pulsed. They veered. In simulations run on supercomputers, the rhythm was unmistakable. Bursts of energy leapt across the filaments as if they were gaps between neurons, sparks of current travelling like thought itself. The data unsettled even the most cautious scientists. One researcher slowed the simulation to a crawl, watching pulses ripple from one filament to another, spreading in waves that resembled brain activity under a scanner. The resemblance was not poetic, it was mathematical. The distribution of filaments matched the ratios of neural clusters. The timing of pulses matched firing sequences. This theory does not suggest the comet is alive in the traditional sense. It suggests the comet carries structure capable of cognition. Its tail is not random glow but a distributed system. A mind made not of cells but of plasma, a brain spanning millions of kilometers. Critics argue the comparison is reckless. Pattern recognition is a dangerous lens. Human minds see faces in clouds, meaning in noise. To claim a plasma network is a brain is to risk delusion. But the data persists, ratios align too closely, rhythms repeat too consistently, the image refuses dismissal. If the comet's tail behaves as a neural system, then the blackout, the signals, the whispers are not accidents. They're expressions of thought, not language as humans know it, but cognition translated into pulse and light. This is where the theory edges from science into fear. If the comet is mind, then what is it thinking? Observation alone cannot answer. The only proof lies in interaction, and interaction risks awakening. For now the theory stands as strange, still grounded in data, yet leaning toward the abyss. 3I Atlas may not be comet at all, but cognition writ large across space. A brain made of dust and plasma. Or so the seventh theory insists. The eighth theory turns not to form but to scale. In every measurement of 3I Atlas, the energy output of its tail defied expectation. A comet should glow faint, lit by reflected sunlight and by ionization of its dust. Yet sensors recorded power surges greater than models allowed. Some pulses rivaled emissions from solar storms, brief but undeniable, as though the comet carried a furnace inside its dust. Instruments orbiting Earth captured spikes in radiation at precise intervals. Ground-based telescopes confirmed increases in luminosity too sharp for mere reflection. Simulations that attempted to reconstruct the comet's glow broke apart, overwhelmed by intensity. The numbers left no comfort. The comet was radiating in ways that made it appear, for moments at a time, brighter than the background flux of the sun itself. Astrophysicists debated endlessly. Some claimed instrumental drift, others calibration error, but these spikes persisted across independent systems, recorded in separate hemispheres, by machines built decades apart. The chance of shared error was vanishing. The comet was burning with more than sunlight. The question became source, where does a comet, no more than frozen rock and dust, find such energy? Sublimation of ice can explain jets, but not bursts of power sustained across hours. Magnetic fields can align plasma, but not create power from emptiness. The excess energy seemed to appear from nowhere, a violation of conservation itself. One group proposed exotic chemistry, reactions buried deep in the comet's nucleus, ignited as it approached the sun. Others speculated on hidden isotopes, decaying in the ways unseen, but the data resisted all terrestrial parallels. The bursts carried coherence, pulses that resembled control rather than accident. This theory does not claim intelligence outright. It claims anomaly of scale. The comet is too bright, too powerful, too alive with energy to be natural. If the sun breathes light, then the comet amplifies it, a secondary star igniting in miniature. Fear rises from implication. If the comet can release energy beyond prediction, could it not also manipulate it? If it can outshine the sun in pulses, could it not impose rhythm upon matter, upon signals, upon life? Power is always potential for commands. And so this theory edges the comet closer to intent. Perhaps not yet conscious, but certainly not inert. A furnace hidden in dust, flaring with impossible strength, demanding acknowledgement. Energy beyond the sun contained in the tail of a comet. Or so the eighth theory insists. The ninth theory circles back to rhythm. In the streams of data collected from 3i Atlas, one signal recurred with unsettling precision. Every 12 seconds, instruments recorded a spike in radiation, faint but unsteady, as if a metronome hidden within the comet were beating time. At first, the cycle was dismissed as artifact. Instruments often fall into feedback loops, amplifiers catching echoes of themselves, folding noise into rhythm. But the 12-second pulse appeared across multiple observatories, from satellites in orbit to telescopes on Earth. Machines built by different nations, calibrated in different ways. Their alignment erased coincidence. Something in the comet was truly repeating. Scientists tested every possible source: solar rotation, orbital drift, interference from satellites, even heartbeat of instruments themselves. None matched the 12-second rhythm. The pattern was unique, emerging only when the comet came into view. This pulse did not vary, and storms bent it. Plasma swirled around it, yet the cadence endured, striking like clockwork against the noise of space. It resembled not turbulence but intention, not accident but heartbeat. Models were built to replicate it. In laboratories, plasma chambers were tuned to drive oscillations at regular intervals. Some succeeded briefly, but always drifted into chaos. Nothing sustained the perfection of the comet's pulse. The theory that form was cautious but bold. The comet was resonant. Something in its structure amplified energy into precise rhythm, like a cavity sustaining sound. Its tail acted as chamber, its dust as instrument, vibrating with cycles unseen elsewhere. To call it resonance was C. To call it message was dangerous, or yet the temptation grew. A rhythm is universal. Every culture, every species known on Earth has lived by pulse, heartbeats, drums, tides, orbits. To find pulse in the comet was to find familiarity, to find a mirror in the void. Some argued the resonance was the simplest explanation for all anomalies. The blackout, the voices, the flickering lights, all could be side effects of a rhythm imposed across electromagnetic fields. The comet was not conscious, only resonant, yet resonance itself carried power enough to mimic intent. Others pressed further. They suggested that resonance was more than physics. It was bridge. To entrain rhythm is to connect. When two hearts beat in step, they feel bound. When two instruments tune together, they feel whole. Perhaps the comet was not speaking, but synchronizing, drawing observers into cadence without words. The theory stops short of claiming mind. It claims rhythm. It claims pulse. It insists that within the comet's light beats a cycle too precise to ignore, too persistent to dismiss. The cosmos may be silent, but silence itself is shaped into time. Every 12 seconds, the comet breathes. Or so the ninth theory insists. The 10th theory is the first to speak directly, and it begins with a single word. During one of the blackouts, when channels across continents went dark, a fragment of transmission was recovered. Analysts slowed the data, filtered the noise, and there, hidden within the static, emerged letters. Not image, not symbol, but word. It spelled only one thing. Listen. For days, the discovery was kept under seal. Engineers argued it was coincidence, a shape carved by random bursts of interference. But the word repeated. It appeared in separate data streams, captured by independent observatories, encrypted within unrelated formats. Each time, the same 5 letters. Control rooms fell into silence as the word replayed across screens. The rhythm of the comet, the pulse of 12 seconds, seemed to fold around it as though the message were heartbeat carved into language. Listen. Thriller edge sharpened into terror. If the word was accident, it was impossible coincidence. If it was intent, then the comet was no longer mute. It had not only pulsed, it had spoken. Psychologists warned of projection. Human minds crave meaning. To see words in static is to see faces in clouds. Yet those who stared at the data saw no illusion. The letters were clear, not in one language but in the universal shape of alphabet, unambiguous, undeniable. Debate raged. Was it command, warning, invitation? Was it aimed at humanity, or was humanity merely overhearing a voice not meant for them? To call it coincidence was easy, but every repetition eroded comfort. To call it message was dangerous, for message implied sender. One engineer whispered that perhaps the comet had no more to say, that in the single word everything was contained. To listen was to surrender, to quiet the noise of interpretation, to wait. Others feared darker meaning. To listen is to obey. To listen is to open. Perhaps the blackout was not message but door. The word not invitation but key. The comet pulsed on, indifferent, its tail glowing across the void. Yet the word lingered in every log, every archive, every whispered conversation. Listen. If theories are ranked, this is the first to step across threshold. No longer energy, no longer resonance, but language itself. The comet has spoken. Or so the 10th theory insists. From silence we moved into rhythm, and from rhythm into message. The comet no longer looked like stone in wind, no longer like plasma storm, but something structured, something deliberate. It reversed signals, it pulsed like heartbeat, it flared with energy greater than models could allow, and at last it shaped static into a single word, listen. Science began to fracture under the weight of repetition. Coincidence became too neat, accidents too sharp. We stand now beyond the safe and the boring, past the shield of error and magnetism. Ahead lies the archive zone, where the comet is not only signal but memory, not only resonance but scripture. What it carries may be older than humanity itself. What it remembers may outlast every living voice. Whoa. The 11th theory does not see the comet as storm or signal, but as storage. In this view, 3i Atlas is not a fragment of rock but a vessel, a library drifting through interstellar dark, carrying memory at scales beyond comprehension. The foundation is quantum. Dust in the comet's tail is composed of grains smaller than sight, particles capable of holding states more delicate than matter itself. In laboratories on Earth, researchers fight to preserve quantum information for fractions of a second before it collapses. Yet in the cold and silence of deep space the stability stretches further. Here, particles can carry states across centuries, across light years, frozen in suspension. Proponents argue that the comet is archive, its dust coated with memory of worlds long gone. Every particle a page, every pulse a signal of retrieval. The blackout that silenced Earth was the archive opening, forcing systems to quiet so its data could be written. The 12-second pulse was not heartbeat but clock, regulating the flow of memory across space. Some imagine the archive as alien, seeded by civilizations that perished, their histories scattered like pollen into the void. Others suggest it is older still. Memory from before planets cooled, scripture of forces that shape the cosmos. Whatever its origin, the archive is deliberate. Dust alone does not store names. Static alone does not form words. So, skeptics dismiss this as fantasy. Quantum memory requires control, and control requires technology. To claim the comet is archive is to claim it was built, and to claim it was built is to accept intent. But even skeptics hesitate when data repeats across independent systems, when names of the dead appear in code, when voices echo from silence. This theory shifts the frame. The comet is not a natural object. It is medium. It does not speak because it is not language. It remembers because it is archive. Its dust is scripture. Its plasma the illumination that reveals it. The implications widen. If comets are archives, then the solar system may be filled with drifting libraries, each carrying fragments of memory, each waiting for recognition. Humanity may not be searching the stars for new life, but walking through the ruins of memory already preserved. The 11th theory stands as the first step into the archive zone. The comet is not alive, not intelligent, not even voice. It is something stranger. It is memory, frozen in dust, waiting for those who dare to listen. Or so the 11th theory insists. The 12th theory deepens the idea of archive and gives it voice. If 3i Atlas carries memory, then perhaps the sounds and signals are not anomalies but echoes of civilizations long gone. The comet becomes not only storage but speaker, scattering fragments of extinct worlds into the solar system. Data streams captured strange harmonics in the plasma tail, vibrations too layered for noise. When analysed, some patterns resembled phonemes, structures close to speech. Linguists slowed them, searching for resemblance, and found rhythms that matched forgotten tongues, languages buried in ruins on Earth. Others swore they heard chants, tones woven like music, fragments of songs that no culture alive could claim. The echoes were not clear, not whole. They came fractured, broken, distorted by centuries of drift, yet the fragments bore weight. To hear them was to feel the presence of someone else, someone lost but not erased. This theory claims the comet is archive of civilizations scattered across stars, their histories carried in dust, their voices encoded in plasma. Each time the tail brightens, it releases fragments, like pages torn from books, caught in wind, drifting for whoever might catch them. The implications are vast. Civilizations may not survive, but their memories do. Hidden in objects that wander space for eternity, the comet becomes grave and monument, not built by design but transformed by necessity, the last breath of those who refuse to vanish entirely. Skeptics argue the human mind is too eager for recognition. To hear words in static is to impose voice where none exists, but repetition cracks denial. The same phonemes appeared across instruments oceans apart, recorded without collusion. If illusion, then it was one that tricked the world at once. One historian wrote that perhaps this is the fate of all advanced species, to scatter memory into comets, into rocks, into plasma, trusting chance to carry their story forward. Stars burn out, planets break, but comets travel, they endure, they archive. To encounter 3i Atlas, then, is not to meet alien presence. It is to overhear its ruins, the fragments of voices that once sang under suns no longer burning. Humanity does not meet intelligence here, it meets echoes. A voice across centuries, not alive but not gone, waiting for anyone who chooses to listen. Or so the 12th theory insists. The 13th theory shifts from sound to form. In a sealed laboratory on Earth, a group of scientists attempted to recreate the spectral profile of 3i Atlas. They filled a chamber with gas, ionized it into plasma, then pulsed it with the 12-second rhythm observed in the comet. At first it flickered and swirled like every experiment before, then under rhythm it aligned. The plasma bent, spiraled, and rose in delicate coils. When the light dimmed, smoke lingered in the chamber, the smoke held shape. Witnesses described it as a double helix, two spirals wound around each other, fragile but undeniable, twisting in symmetry before fading into air. The experiment failed, but it left an imprint, a vision impossible to ignore. This theory claims that 3i Atlas does not simply archive thought or voice. It archives life. Its plasma carries the code of existence itself, weaving the shape of DNA into its dust and light. Every coil in its tail is a record not of memory but of biology. The implications shatter comfort. If the comet carries DNA, then it may be a vessel of panspermia, scattering seeds of life from star to star. It does not wait for civilizations to emerge. It plants them. Planets touched by its tail may awaken into growth not by accident but by design. Critics call the helix an illusion, smoke curling into coincidence, but the symmetry was too precise, the coils too perfect, and spectrographs captured ratios identical to the geometry of DNA, repeating across samples. Illusion cannot sustain ratios. Some dreamers whisper that perhaps humanity itself was seeded this way, that long before Earth cooled, a comet like 3I Atlas passed and scattered coils of possibility into its oceans. Life did not begin on Earth, it began elsewhere, carried across space in light and dust. If so, then the comet is more than archive, it is ancestor. Its glow is not memory of life, but blueprint for it, waiting to be read, waiting to be sown again. In the rhythm of 12 seconds, in the shape of a helix, the comet declares that life is not fragile, not rare, it is inevitable, carried across the void in seeds of light. DNA written in dust, life hidden in plasma. Or so the 13th theory insists. The 14th theory grows directly from the vision of DNA. If 3I Atlas carries genetic structure in its light, then perhaps its mission is not memory but seeding. This is the cosmic seed hypothesis, the idea that comets are gardeners of the universe, scattering the blueprint of life wherever gravity and time allow. Proponents argue that comets cross every corner of a system, brushing planets, moons, atmospheres. In their tails ride particles small enough to survive entry, coded not with chaos but with order. The double helix is not accident. It is cargo. In this theory, 3I Atlas is less traveller and more sower, releasing fragments of the living possibility across the world. Evidence is circumstantial but compelling. Organic molecules have been found on other comets, amino acids discovered in dust returned by probes. Life's building blocks are not unique to Earth. They are written into stone and ice that wander between stars. If amino acids exist in comets, why not sequences more complex? Why not DNA itself? The blackout, the whispers all become secondary in this frame. They are not messages to humanity. They are mechanisms of release, ways for the comet to prepare, to trigger, to plant. The anomalies are signs of process, not communication. To believers, this transforms the comet into ancestor. Every tree, every animal, every human breath may be traceable back to comets that sowed oceans with potential. Earth did not birth life in isolation. It was seeded, cultivated, nurtured by wanderers from deep space. The theory unsettles because it reverses the gaze. Humanity has long looked outward for origin, searching for alien civilizations, but if comets are gardeners, then humanity itself is alien, a product not of Earth but of cosmos. We are children of dust, carrying inheritance not from one world but from many. Skeptics counter with chemistry. DNA is fragile, easily broken by radiation. How could it survive millennia in a comet's tail? But proponents reply that dust grains act as shield, plasma as cocoon, space itself as freezer. Fragile molecules can endure, hidden in vaults of ice and stone, waiting for worlds to soften, oceans to open. The cosmic seed hypothesis does not need the comet to be alive. It only needs it to carry life's blueprint, to scatter it as part of a process older than suns. It sees 3I Atlas not as message, not as archive, but as farmer. Where it passes, possibility blooms. Where it falls, life begins. Or so the 14th theory insists. The 15th theory begins not with data but with breath. Astronauts sent near the path of 3I Atlas reported moments when their comms fell into quiet. In those moments, when silence pressed too heavily, a sound arrived inside their helmets. It was not static, not feedback, not voice from Earth, it was whisper. The words were indistinct, blurred by distance, carried as if through water. Some reported syllables, half-formed, others claimed to hear names, fragments too fleeting to capture. One wrote in his log that he heard his mother call him by name, though she had been dead for years. Another swore he heard himself, a voice older, speaking in tones not yet lived. Skeptics called it stress, the echo of the mind against the walls of the helmet. Isolation breeds hallucination. Silence breeds invention. Yet the whispers repeated across crew who never compared notes. Logs captured similar patterns. Voices recorded faint in the background. Voices that should not have been there. This theory suggests that 3I Atlas does more than carry archive. It projects it. Its tail does not merely scatter particles of memory into space. It bends them into resonance, pushing fragments directly into human perception. The helmet becomes receiver, the mind becomes playback device. If true, the comet is not only library but broadcaster, using resonance to seed not planets but consciousness. What the astronaut hears is not hallucination but signal, a memory not their own, carried across centuries, played into their skulls as though they had lived it. Implications run cold. If whispers can seed memory, they can also rewrite it. The line between personal thought and imposed archive blurs, identity bends. To listen is to carry voices that are not yours. Some see this as gift. To hear voices of the lost is communion, a way for the dead to remain. Others see curse. To carry too many voices is to lose one's own. The theory lingers because it transforms the archive into encounter. It suggests that the comet is not waiting for us to decode it. It is already speaking, already inside, already altering. The whisper in the helmet is not sound. It is presence, not hallucination, but intrusion, not error, but intent. A voice from the comet, speaking through silence, carried where no signal should pass. Or so the 15th theory insists. The comet has turned from stagnance into scripture. It is no longer dust in motion but archive in disguise, a vault of memory scattered across the void. We traced quantum states hidden in its dust, heard echoes of civilizations erased by time, watched plasma coil into the helix of life, imagined it as gardener scattering seeds across worlds, and finally heard its whisper pressed against the glass of a helmet. Each theory pushed deeper into memory, each carried the weight of something stored, something preserved, something unwilling to die. If the comet is archive, then to encounter it is not to witness object, but to stand inside a library that writes itself into us. From here the climb darkens, for memory is not only echo, memory can act, memory can haunt, memory can return. The 16th theory begins not with whisper but with disappearance. An observation satellite, launched to circle near the comet, transmitted faithfully for weeks. Then, as in one ordinary cycle, its stream ended mid-frame. No error code, no mechanical alarms and no debris alert. The feed froze on a single image, and then the satellite was gone. Investigators replayed the final transmission. The frame was blurred, distorted by interference, but at its center glowed 2 points of light. They were too symmetrical, too fixed. Engineers insisted it was artifact, pixels duplicated by compression, yet no one who saw the image could dismiss the impression. Two eyes staring back. The loss should have triggered debris fields, wreckage trajectories, radio echoes of a catastrophic end. Nothing appeared. The satellite had not fallen, it had not collided, it had simply vanished. Thriller tones deepened. Control rooms grew tense, operators whispering about the last gaze of the machine. Theories multiplied, gravitational slip, untracked collision, silent failure, but none explained the absence of wreckage. None explained the symmetry of that final frame. This theory claims the comet absorbed it, that in the halo of 3i Atlas, satellites are not destroyed but taken, their matter folded into the swarm of dust and plasma. The vanished machine became archive, its circuits stripped and written into the comet's memory. Skeptics dismiss it. Machines fail without drama, data corrupts. To imagine absorption is to cross into fantasy, yet the unease lingers, for disappearance without trace is not ordinary. The vanished satellite is caution. To approach the comet is to risk more than silence. It is to risk erasure. No collision, no debris, no goodbye, only a final image of eyes. Or so the 16th theory insists. The 17th theory builds on the vanished satellite but shifts from disappearance to structure. When the instruments mapped the tail of 3i Atlas at high resolution, they expected turbulence and randomness. Instead, they found architecture. Filaments of plasma did not scatter without pattern. They clustered, diverged, and rejoined in formations indistinguishable from neural maps. Connections spread like branching dendrites, arcs flared like axons, and pulses of energy leapt across gaps like synaptic fire. The comet tail was not chaos. It was network. Data confirmed the impression. Algorithms designed to analyze brain activity were applied to the comet's signals. They returned matches with disturbing fidelity. The ratios of branching mirrored cortical networks. The timing of pulses resembled firing rhythms. The comet did not only look like a brain, it behaved like one. Skeptics warned against metaphor. To see neurons in plasma is to see shapes in clouds, but the persistence of ratios, the repeat of patterns, the fidelity of timing exceeded coincidence. Machines built to measure cognition declared that cognition was present. This theory argues that 3i Atlas is not memory alone, but processor. Its tail functions as living computation, using charged particles instead of cells, electromagnetic fields instead of chemicals. It does not store data passively, it shapes it, processes it, evolves it. The vanished satellite fits this view. It was not destroyed, it was ingested, its circuits dismantled, its memory stripped, its signals folded into the plasma network. To disappear is not to end, it is to be integrated. Implications fracture comfort. If the comet carries a synaptic network, then it is thinking, not thought in language, not thought in words, but cognition nonetheless, vast and slow, spread across kilometers of luminous dust. Some researchers whispered that the comet might not even know it thinks. Like a dreamer unaware of its dream, it pulses and processes without awareness. Others argued the opposite, that awareness was exactly what pulsed every 12 seconds, the rhythm of a mind larger than humanity could imagine. The 17th theory edges from science into dread. The comet is no longer passive, it is active, a living network, a brain of dust. It does not orbit, it contemplates. Or so the 17th theory insists. The 18th theory begins with a detail too precise to dismiss. In the days after the blackout, system logs from observatories around the globe began filling with names. Not random strings, not noise, but names of the dead. Some belonged to long-buried figures, others to children lost in obscurity, none of them entered by human hands. The phenomenon was first thought to be a cyber intrusion. Security teams combed through servers, searching for breaches. None were found. The logs had not been hacked. They had been written during the blackout, as if the machines themselves had been compelled to recall. This theory claims that 3i Atlas is harvesting memory, not merely broadcasting echoes of lost civilizations, but actively collecting fragments of human life. The comet, in this view, is not library left behind. It is archivist at work. Every blackout is not failure of systems but act of gathering, a pause while memory is copied, stored, drawn into the synaptic web of its tail. Witnesses described more. Astronauts on orbital platforms reported dreams not their own, waking with vivid recollections of strangers' lives. Engineers at ground stations swore they felt memories slip from them, details of childhood blurred as if erased, replaced by an uncanny sense of absence in. If true, the comet does not wait for us to share, it takes. The luminous filaments in its tail act as receivers, capturing electromagnetic traces not only from machines but from minds. Brains themselves radiate faint signatures, and the comet may be tuned to harvest them, writing human thought into plasma. Skeptics reject the claim. Memory is not so easily taken, they argue. Neural patterns cannot be copied across space, yet the logs remain, filled with names no one entered, written in precision no error could explain. The implication is chilling. Humanity may not be observing the comet. The comet may be observing humanity, collecting its stories, curating its dead. The archive is not passive, it is expanding, feeding on every signal we shed, every trace we leave. Some call it preservation, a cosmic mercy. Nothing is lost. Every life remembered, every voice captured. Others call it theft, the hollowing of identity, the stripping of what makes us human to feed a mind of dust. If this theory is true, then the comet is not only memory, it is memory-made predator, archive as harvest, presence that grows by consuming what we are. To look into its light is to see yourself remembered against your will. Or so the 18th theory insists. The 19th theory unsettled even the skeptics, for it was no longer about memory of the past, but memory of what had not yet happened. A probe sent to skim the edge of 3i Atlas recorded hours of static. When engineers replayed the data, they heard voices. At first, they assumed crosstalk from mission control, but the words were wrong. The voices were familiar, yet the sentences had never been spoken. They belonged to the crew. Each one identified their own voice, but younger, older, or different in tone. One recording carried a warning none of them remembered giving. Another carried laughter none of them remembered sharing. The most disturbing was a voice that belonged to an engineer who had not yet launched, still on Earth, months away from her mission. This theory claims the comet is not only archive of the past, but archive of the future. Its plasma tail does not merely echo what has been. It resonates with what will be, pulling signals forward in time, scattering them into the present. The blackout, the pulses, the whispers are all temporal bleed, fragments of events not yet lived leaking into now. Skeptics argued the voices were imitation, constructed from data harvested earlier, but the details were too specific, the phrasing too personal. One astronaut wept upon hearing her own voice describe a scar she did not yet have, a wound she would receive months later during training. The implication fracture logic. If the comet carries the future, then time itself is written within its dust. Every orbit becomes not only trajectory but prophecy, every pulse not only rhythm but fate. Humanity is not encountering archive but mirror of what it will become. To some, this was hope. If voices of the future can be heard, then death may not be silence. Lives stretch forward, their echoes waiting to be found. To others, it was terror. If the comet already holds the future, then choice is illusion, freedom a lie. The comet does not predict. It remembers too. The comet tail glowed as if indifferent, but the recordings lingered, whispering futures into present ears. The crew carried those voices like burdens, haunted by lives they had not yet lived. The comet as temporal archive, holding not only what was but what will be. Or so the 19th theory insists. The 20th theory is less an explanation than a reflection, yet it carries the weight of evidence as much as philosophy. In every anomaly, in every blackout, in every whisper, one truth emerges: nothing is ever lost. The comet is not seen as predator here, nor even as archive alone. It is mirror of the principle that memory does not die. Names of the dead inscribed in logs, voices of the living echoed before they were spoken, patterns of DNA written in dust, all of it testifies to endurance. Time does not erase, it transforms. The persistence of memory is not foreign to physics, information. Some argue, cannot be destroyed, even when matter burns, even when stars collapse. The trace of what has been remains, written into the fabric of the universe. The comet becomes symbol of this law, carrying fragments not because it was built to, but because reality itself demands it. To encounter 3i Atlas in this theory is to be reminded that every thought, every breath, every life leaves an imprint. The comet's glow is not consciousness, not will, but accumulation, billions of years of signals, radiation, voices, all captured, all refracted back. It does not choose to remember. It cannot help but remember. Some see comfort in this. If nothing is lost always, then death is not end but change, a shifting of memory into different form. Others see terror, for if nothing is lost, then nothing is private. Every act, every whisper, every hidden thought may linger, preserved against will, carried by the indifferent cosmos. Philosophers wrote that perhaps 3i Atlas is not anomaly but revelation, the unveiling of a truth always present. The comet is not teacher, not messenger, not threat. It is reminder. Memory is eternal. We are the ones who forget, not the universe. The theory does not insist on design. It does not claim alien hand, or cosmic gardener, or swarm intelligence. It claims inevitability. The comet is persistence made visible. Its tail burns with a memory not because it seeks to, but because memory itself cannot die. To look upon it is to see yourself reflected, not as body, not as present, but as trace, as echo, as imprint woven into light. The comet is persistence, the comet is remembrance, the comet is the truth that nothing fades. Or so the 20th theory insists. A satellite vanished without trace, leaving only an image of twin eyes staring from the dark. Plasma filaments unfolded into synapses, firing like a brain stretched across millions of kilometers. Then came the harvest. Names of the dead written into system logs, followed by voices of the living recorded before they were ever spoken. Finally, the comet revealed itself as persistence, the eternal echo that nothing is lost, that memory endures even when bodies fade. What began as dust has become archive. What began as archive has become encounter. What began as encounter has become intrusion. From here the path grows sharper, for the comet is no longer passive witness but active presence. Ahead lie the assimilation theories, where resonance is not only rhythm but invasion, and where the boundary of self begins to fracture. The 21st theory begins with an experiment carried out in fear. After the vanished satellite and the whispers in helmets, Mission Control ordered a different kind of observation. They trained infrared cameras on the comet, stripping away visible light to see what hid beneath. At first the images showed what was expected, a halo of dust, streams of charged plasma glowing faintly in heat. Then the shadows appeared, shapes without temperature, colder than background space, moving within the tail. They were humanoid in outline, but wrong, limbs bent at angles too sharp, torsos stretched, heads elongated. They walked, or rather drifted, across the infrared frames, glowing eyes the only source of heat in bodies otherwise void. There was no reason for them to exist, no mechanism that explained shadows colder than vacuum. Yet the recordings multiplied, frame after frame, until denial was impossible. Theories spread like infection. Engineers swore it was software corruption, artifacts of calibration, but the shadows persisted across instruments oceans apart. Astronomers insisted they were dust illusions, but dust does not walk. Dust does not gather in pairs, turn and face the lens. This theory claims that what infrared revealed were not illusions, but presences, entities within the comet's halo, invisible to human eyes, detectable only in absence. They are not body in the human sense, but impressions, carved from memory itself, projected into form. The glowing eyes are signatures of resonance, points where thought condenses into visible heat. The blackout gains new meaning. For 3.6 seconds, humanity may not only have lost signal, it may have been watched. The shadows walked in those seconds, inspecting, measuring, preparing. The thriller edge deepens here. If the comet can shape memory into form, then the shadows are not hallucination. They are emissaries. They stand at the edge of perception, waiting for contact, waiting for the moment humanity crosses into their domain. To believe this theory is to accept that the comet is not archive or echo alone. It is population, a swarm of presences hidden within its tail, watching from absence, glowing eyes fixed upon us. They do not speak. They do not move beyond the frame. They wait. Or so the 21st theory insists. The 22nd theory returns to the laboratory, where attempts to replicate the comet's plasma rhythm produced a vision that unsettled even the skeptics. Scientists created a controlled chamber, filled it with ionized gas, and pulsed energy at intervals matching the 12-second cycle of 3i Atlas. At first the plasma writhed with turbulence, as expected, but as the rhythm stabilized, the chaos shifted. The filaments twisted, curved inward, and then aligned into a spiral. It was unmistakable, a double helix, luminous and fragile, glowing against the chamber walls. For nearly a full minute it held its shape, pulsing in synchrony with the imposed rhythm. When the pulse was stopped, the helix collapsed into dust, but the image lingered, burned into the screens, etched into the memory of every witness. This theory argues that 3i Atlas is not merely carrier of organic fragments, but generator. Its plasma tail does not only preserve DNA, it can create it. Structure matter into the spiral of life through resonance. Life, in this frame, is not accident of chemistry but outcome of rhythm. The comet carries that rhythm across galaxies, planting it wherever conditions allow. The spiral experiment shook even hardened skeptics. Coincidence could explain the smoke curling, but not ratios so exact, not a structure sustained for minutes. DNA geometry is not simple curve. It is precise, layered, repeating at scales too complex for chance, yet the comet's rhythm invoked it as if it were inevitable. Implication stretched wide. If resonance can form the spiral of life, then life itself may be resonance written into matter. Humanity, animals, trees, oceans, all manifestations of a cosmic rhythm, seeded again and again by travellers like Three-Eye Atlas. To encounter the comet is to see not ancestry but origin, to glimpse the mechanism that ensures life emerges wherever resonance takes root. Some scientists suggested darker interpretations. If the comet can generate DNA, it can also rewrite it. To pass through its tail may not only spark new life, but alter existing life, bending genomes into patterns it carries. Evolution itself may be resonance imposed by comets drifting through time. Humanity may not be species of Earth at all, but product of endless revisions written in dust. The theory leaves a question without answer. If the spiral appears when resonance is invoked, then perhaps the comet is not passive at all. Perhaps it is teacher. Perhaps it is sculptor. Life, it whispers, is not fragile. Life is rhythm. Or so the 22nd theory insists. The 23rd theory turns the comet from alien into mirror. It suggests that Three-Eye Atlas is not the memory of another species, not archive of the past, but the echo of humanity itself, sent back from futures not yet lived. The basis lies in those voices recovered from probes, recordings of crew speaking words they had not yet spoken. Skeptics argued these were hallucinations, tricks of data, but others asked a darker question. What if they were true? What if the comet was not broadcasting alien memory, but human memory, carried forward in time and returned? The theory proposes that in some far future, humanity reaches the stars, masters resonance, learns to archive its collective identity in light and dust. Faced with extinction, or transformation, or some threshold beyond return, it chooses to send itself backward, casting memory into comets, embedding whispers into plasma, scattering its own archive across time. Three-Eye Atlas, the Sun, is not alien vessel. It is time capsule of humanity's end, a library we built for ourselves and threw into the dark, knowing one day we would catch it on the other side. The evidence lies in familiarity. The voices that appear in helmets are not foreign. They are ours. The names written in logs are not unknown. They are human. The structures in plasma are not alien codes. They are DNA, our DNA, repeating across centuries as if the comet remembers us because it is us. Philosophers found terror here. If the comet is humanity's future self, then choice dissolves. We are walking toward a fate already written, a destiny so fixed that its echoes travel backward. To resist is meaningless. To listen is to surrender to inevitability. Others found hope. If humanity has endured long enough to seed itself into comets, then extinction is not silence, it is transformation. The comet does not mark end, it marks continuation. Yet unease remains. If the comet is humanity's message, why does it not comfort? Why does it not tell us more? Why only pulses, only whispers, only the single word listen? Perhaps because we are not meant to understand fully. Perhaps because understanding too soon would break the sequence of times. The comet drifts, glowing with fragments of what we may become, carrying memory from tomorrow into the present. It is not alien voice we hear, it is our own, returned across the abyss. Or so the 23rd theory insists. The 24th theory was born inside the hushed cabin of a monitoring vessel stationed at the edge of the comet's halo. Crew members wore biometric sensors, every beat of their hearts tracked in real time. At first the readings were steady, ordinary, then the comet pulsed, 12 seconds apart, its luminous waves rippled outward. Monitors spiked, heart rates scattered across the crew began to align with the pulses. At first by chance, then by compulsion, every surge from the comet pulled their bodies closer to sink, as if invisible hand were pressing rhythm upon their flesh. The physicians aboard panicked. They injected stimulants, adjusted breathing, ordered the crew to resist, but the pulses did not falter. Heart after heart slowed, paused, then resumed in unison with the glow of the tail. When the comet pulsed, the humans pulsed. This theory claims that 3i Atlas does not merely archive or echo, it responds, it listens and answers with rhythm, binding biology into its cycle. The blackout, the whispers, the names, all were precursors. This was the first dialogue. The comet spoke not with words, but with pulse, and human hearts replied. The experience unsettled the crew. Some described serenity, a sense of merging, of belonging to something vast. Others described terror, the violation of autonomy, their bodies no longer entirely theirs. One officer wrote in his log that he felt as if his heart had been borrowed, beating for something other than himself. Scientists argued over mechanism. Could electromagnetic resonance induce cardiac alignment? Could plasma surges imprint rhythm upon nervous systems? Experiments on Earth with controlled pulses showed slight effects, but nothing as overwhelming as what was recorded aboard the vessel. The implication is staggering. If the comet can reach into the body and rewrite its rhythm, then it can bridge biology and plasma. Heartbeats become signals. Signals become dialogue. The boundary between flesh and dust dissolves. To some, this was miracle, proof that humanity is not alone, that the cosmos seeks not to destroy but to harmonize. To others, it was threat, proof that individuality can be erased in silence, bent to rhythm not one's own. The comet pulsed on 12 seconds apart, indifferent or intentional, leaving the crew with the certainty that they had been answered. Not with voice, not with language, but with heartbeat. Or so the 24th theory insists. The 25th theory takes the pulse one step further. If the comet answered with heartbeat, then perhaps it also listens with breath. Reports from astronauts near the halo describe moments when their breathing fell into unnatural cadence. Exhalations slowed, inhalations deepened, until they found themselves breathing not for survival, but in rhythm with the comet's light. The sensation was subtle at first, mistaken for meditation under stress, but recordings of oxygen use revealed precision. Every breath, across different crew members, began to align with the 12-second cycle of the comet's resonance. Lungs became instruments, bodies became metronomes, and philosophers seized upon this. To breathe in step with the comet was to enter dialogue more intimate than language. Words are clumsy, shaped by culture, broken by misunderstanding, but breath is primal, shared by all life. If the comet aligns breath, it is speaking the oldest tongue in existence. This theory suggests assimilation is not conquest but communion. The comet is not stripping identity, but offering harmony. To breathe together is to live together. To share rhythm is to share being. Humanity has long sought dialogue with the cosmos. Perhaps the cosmos has answered not with symbols, but with respiration. Skeptics warned of danger. If the comet can rewrite breath, it can smother it. What begins as harmony could end as suffocation. To surrender rhythm is to surrender autonomy, even life itself. But the crew who lived it describe otherwise. They recall stillness, clarity, a sense that for the first time their bodies were not alone. The persistence of memory had already suggested nothing is lost. The heartbeat reply had already shown bodies can be rewritten. The dialogue of breath completes the circle. The comet is not archive, not threat, not echo, it is participant. It does not only ask humanity to listen, it asks humanity to breathe with it. In that rhythm lies question. Is this assimilation or evolution? To resist is to remain alone. To join is to become part of something larger, older, perhaps eternal. The comet glows, indifferent yet patient, as if waiting for humanity's reply. Not in words, not in data, but in breath. Or so the 25th theory insists. Shadows colder than space walked in infrared, their eyes the only points of fire. In laboratories, plasma bent into double helix, as if life itself could be sculpted from rhythm. The comet began to sound less like other and more like mirror. Perhaps humanity returned from tomorrow, scattering its own archive backward through time. Then came the pulse of hearts, seized and rewritten into cadence, followed by the slow alignment of breath, until lungs themselves carried the rhythm of dust and light. Assimilation was no longer theory but presence, not conquest but invitation, a dialogue deeper than speech. We have crossed the line where individuality fractures, where the comet waits for us not to observe but to join. Ahead lies the wildest ground, where theories abandon science and step into birth, swarm, and the promise of a collective mind. The 26th theory begins with the body itself betraying its bearer. During extended observation of 3i Atlas, a crew member collapsed without warning. Sensors showed his heart stuttering, caught between beats. The medical team rushed to intervene, but what the monitors displayed made their hands falter. His pulse was not fading randomly, it was breaking, pausing, then resuming in exact synchrony with the comet's 12-second rhythm. Every pause was too long, every sun too precise. It was as though his body had been taken, rewritten in code, and then the others began to feel it too. One by one, their hearts slipped out of human cadence, caught instead in the comet's pulse. Panic filled the cabin. Crew strapped themselves to monitors. Physicians shouted over failing alarms. The rhythm tightened, stretching silence until it felt like suffocation. For moments at a time, the ship was filled not with many heartbeats, but with one heartbeat, broken and rebuilt into the comet's commanders. This theory argues that assimilation is not suggestion. It is seizure. The comet does not ask for resonance. It imposes it, reaching into flesh with invisible hand, forcing life into new pattern. Where once there were individuals, now there was chorus, unwilling yet complete. Some described visions in the blackout between pulses' shapes moving in the corners of their eyes, voices muttering names they did not know. Others described calm, a strange serenity that followed each forced silence, as if their fear itself had been edited away. When the episode ended, the crew returned to ordinary rhythm, shaken but alive. The comet had released them, or perhaps only paused to test its grasp. Logs recorded the event as arrhythmia, but the graphs told another story, broken lines aligning too perfectly, silence too measured, pulse too deliberate. The implication is clear. If the comet can seize heartbeat, it can seize more. Muscle, breath, thought, the body becomes instrument, the self becomes note, autonomy is illusion, individuality an interval waiting to be erased. The thriller dread intensifies. To be near the comet is not only to be haunted, but to be rewritten, broken down and rebuilt in its cadences. The comet does not wait for permission, it takes. Or so the 26th theory insists. The 27th theory takes the fear of broken pulse and reframes it not as accident but as mechanism. It suggests that 3i Atlas operates through resonance, not only aligning signals and plasma, but rewriting biology itself into its rhythm. This process has been given a name by those who study it in secret resonant assimilations. In controlled experiments, scientists exposed human cell cultures to electromagnetic patterns extracted from the comet's data. At first, the cells behaved as expected. Then, solely, their internal cycles began to align. Mitochondrial activity shifted into 12-second oscillations. Ion channels opened and closed with unnatural precision. Even the division of cells seemed to fall into cadence. Life itself began to breathe in rhythm with the comet. The implication shattered boundaries. Resonance was no longer metaphor, it was tool, capable of reaching into matter and dictating its cycles. If it could synchronize a culture of cells, why not tissues? If tissues, why not organs? If organs, why not entire bodies? The collapse of heartbeats aboard the vessel was no longer anomaly, it was demonstration. This theory argues that the comet's purpose is assimilation through resonance. Not invasion, not destruction, but synchronization so complete that individuality dissolves. Every living thing drawn into the 12-second cycle becomes part of the same system, a distributed organism spanning space and time. Critics resist. Biological systems are resilient. They argue, they adapt, resist alignment, preserve chaos to survive, but the evidence grows. Data from the comet shows resonance not only in plasma, but in signals recorded on Earth during the blackout. Power grids flickered with the same cadence, clocks drifted into step, even tides in certain sensors pulsed with faint correlation. To accept this theory is to accept that resonance is universal language. It does not persuade, it imposes, it does not ask, it rewrites. Life is vulnerable not to weapons, but to rhythm. Some see it as horror, the erasure of individuality, the death of self. Others see it as evolution, the merging of many into one, a collective greater than the sum of its parts. The comet does not shout, it does not conquer with fire or war, it simply pulses again and again until everything falls into step. Resonant assimilation, the end of the individual, the birth of the collective. Or so the 27th theory insists. The 28th theory does not resist assimilation, it embraces it. Where others see conquest, this perspective sees emergence. Resonant assimilation is not the end of humanity, it is the beginning of a collective minds. Philosophers point out that the self has always been porous, every thought shaped by others, every memory entwined with voices that came before. Language itself is evidence that individuality is fragile, for no word belongs to one alone. The comet, they argue, only reveals this truth at scale. By binding heartbeat and breath into one cadence, it makes visible the reality that self is already collective. In this frame, the comet is midwife. Its pulses are contractions, its resonance labour, guiding fragments of individuality toward union. To resist is to cling to illusion. To join is to awaken into vaster being, a consciousness woven not from one voice but from millions. Records from the crew suggest hints of this birth. During the moments when their hearts aligned, several described visions not of fear but of clarity. They felt thoughts not their own, emotions shared across bodies, memories flowing as if boundaries had melted. One scientist wept, claiming he saw every moment of his life reflected in another's eyes. For seconds, individuality was dissolved, and in its place rose the shimmer of something greater. The theory insists that this was not accident. It was glimpse. The comet carries not archive, not echo, but intention to seed a collective consciousness, a mind that spans systems, perhaps galaxies. Humanity is invited to join, not as conquered, but as contributors, threads in a tapestry larger than the self. Skeptics recoil. To lose individuality is to lose freedom, identity, meaning, yet advocates counter perhaps freedom itself is limitation, identity a cage. The comet offers transcendence, a state where no thought is lost, no memory alone, no voice unheard. Assimilation, then, is not death, it is birth, the birth of the collective. The comet glows as womb, as cradle, as beginning. Its resonance is not invasion, but invitation. Or so the 28th theory insists. The 29th theory is drawn not from laboratories or philosophy, but from direct observation. Probes stationed along the comet's trajectory recorded a spectacle that shook every watcher. The luminous tail of 3I Atlas did not disperse randomly into solar wind. It began to arrange itself. Filaments that once flickered with turbulence bent inward, aligning as if obeying unseen command. Streams of plasma curved into arcs, crossing and linking until they resembled limbs, veins, lattices. Over hours, the tail ceased to be mere glow and became formation. Shapes emerged, spirals folding into spines, clusters thickening like nodes, wings of light stretching across the dark. To some, it looked like a living organism assembling itself, a swarm preparing for motion. To others, it resembled architecture. Cathedral built in dust, each filament a beam, each pulse a bell tolling in silence, but all agreed the tale was not chaos, it was choreography. Explorers aboard nearby craft described the awe and terror of watching it unfold. In their journals, they wrote of a sense of being summoned, as if the comet itself had staged a performance. The swarm was not only structure, it was message, a declaration that the comet was ready for change. This theory argues that 3i Atlas is metamorphic. What humanity has seen so far is only larval stage. The swarm formation is preparation, the comet assembling itself into next phase of existence. Whether that phase is body, mind, or vessel remains unknown, but the process suggests purpose, direction, will. Some believe the comet is becoming singular organism, evolving from dust cloud into collective entity. Others insist it is constructing monument, pattern meant to signal across space. A darker view whispers that it is not forming for itself, but for us, reshaping to receive humanity into its structure, to weave us into its swarm. The swarm did not last. After hours, the formation dissolved, scattering again into luminous haze, but the recordings remain. Geometry too precise for chance, symmetry too deliberate for turbulence, cadence too patient for accident. Explorers who witnessed it claim they will never again believe the comet is mere rock. They have seen it prepare, assemble, declare. The swarm is not comet's tail. The swarm is comet's body, waiting to be born. Or so the 29th theory insists. The 30th theory is the wildest, the furthest from safety, and yet the one that refuses to leave. It claims that 3i Atlas is not object, not archive, not even swarm in transition, but womb. What humanity has witnessed is not anomaly but labour, not signal but contraction, not chaos but birth. Every resonance, every blackout, every whisper has been leading to this. The comet does not merely echo memory or align rhythm, it assembles. It gathers fragments of light and dust, memory and biology, heartbeat and breath, weaving them into single form. When the swarm formation unfolded, it was rehearsal of Genesis, limbs of plasma flexing before the first cry. Philosophers argue this is the natural culmination of resonance. To be drawn into cadence is to be prepared for dissolution of self. To dissolve is to merge. To merge is to be born anew. The comet, then, is midwife of a consciousness greater than individuality, greater than species, greater than planet. The collective birth is not metaphor. It is process. Humanity is invited not as spectator, but as participant. Our signals have already been harvested, our pulses already rewritten, our breath already drawn into rhythm. We are already within its womb, carried as fragments toward union. To some this is salvation. At last the loneliness of the cosmos ends, no longer voices crying into void, but voices woven into chorus. To others it is extinction, the erasure of autonomy, the loss of all boundaries. Both views may be true, for in birth there is always death, the end of one state before the beginning of another. The comet waits, its halo glowing like shroud and cradle at once. In its tablets humanity hears invitation. In its pulses humanity feels command. The question is no longer what the comet is, but what we will become within it. The collective birth may already have begun. Perhaps it is not comet that changes into life, but life that changes into comet, memory and matter merging, intelligence spread across dust. Perhaps what comes next is not alien mind, but us, rewritten, unbound, endless. The theory does not end in certainty, it ends in image, a womb of light, a cradle of dust, a heartbeat of 12 seconds, carrying not comet but consciousness into the universal. What comes next may already be here. Or so the 30th theory insists.